This is the Ancient and Medieval History Lecture for Thursday, the 3rd of February, 2022. And we start with a summation of what I want you to think about as regards to the fall of the Roman Republic. Yesterday we had a discussion, fairly freewheeling, about various reasons why the Republic fell. But here's the real reason. The people gave it up. They gave up their freedom. It didn't matter to them. They gave up their freedom. It was too difficult a burden. They gave up their freedom. It was too much to bear given all the other stresses. They gave up their freedom. The people of Rome, who were struggling to find work, were desperately at the mercy of their patrons, and they chose to survive rather than fight. The people who ran Rome, at least a critical mass of them, chose to be loyal to their own ambitions rather than to the Republic. You cannot have a free people lose their freedom without them being guilty and complicit in that theft. No one can steal the freedom of people who refuse to allow it. No one. But if people allow it, if they choose to permit it, if they choose to survive rather than fight, it's going to probably go away. I have said repeatedly that freedom is not for cowards. Freedom is only for the brave. And what I mean by that is that freedom is something that you don't live unless you're living by your own convictions, unless you are living by your own set of proportions and values, unless you are acting according to conscience. If you are trying to adapt yourself to someone else's priorities, not because you believe in them, but because you believe that you need to as a means of survival, well, you're not living free. And that's a narcotic. It's habit forming. It is easy to be taken care of if you get past the shame of it as an adult. The Roman people went along. They went along as people killed their opportunity to get jobs with slaves, as people acquired latifundia so vast, hundreds of farms would have previously occupied them. They allowed the Gracchi to be assassinated and no one to be punished. They allowed Marius to take over the state with his private army. They allowed Sulla and the rest to do the same. Because what was the alternative? There are people who have called what happened January 6th, 2021, an insurrection. I think it's nonsense to call it that. It was a riot that had some bad elements that went out of hand. But given that these same exact people who had forgiven over 6 months of rioting in Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis, because those riots were left-wing Antifa and BLM, but home in laser-like at a single few hours of a few people in a riot breaking into the Capitol building as the greatest threat to democracy since 9/11 in Pearl Harbor, which the vice president said a couple of weeks ago. That was not an insurrection. It was a riot that got out of hand. Was it good? No. But do you know why? Do you know why people were protesting in Washington that day? Because people like me had doubts about the security of the election, had doubts about, therefore, the validity of the election. And people like me who had those doubts were told to shut up and get in line. No, we will not investigate beyond a very limited point. No, we will not recount the votes beyond a very limited point. No, we will not go back and try to make sure that everyone who voted had a right to vote. Now, if you believed that a presidential election had been stolen, and the president who had stolen it was going to be approved in the job that day in your capital, might you not exercise your rights to free speech and go and protest? I'm not justifying breaking into the Capitol. I'm not justifying the crimes. I'm also not justifying the fact that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, knew that there would be a big protest and consistently refused to bolster security, which is unfathomable if she was really afraid. I am saying that for many Americans, there was and remains a concern about a very important election. And all of those concerns are just tossed because a few rioters acted badly. So when I say that the Roman people gave up their freedom, I'm not speaking from a high horse. Any free people at any moment might be compelled by circumstances to step up and say no if their freedom seems to be at risk. Not all, but many of those people who were there January 6th were saying no when they felt that freedom in this country was at risk, as they had a right to do in terms of peaceful protest. The whole point of studying the fall of the Roman Republic is because it could happen to us. I hope it doesn't. But when the Roman people laid down and allowed the Gracchus murderers to go unpunished, that was a bad moment. Had the people of Rome filled the streets and said, a tribune has been murdered, his sacred blood has been shed, and no one has taken the blame, no one has been found guilty and punished, it's an affront and an obscenity, and something has to be done. That didn't happen. And because that didn't happen, the rest happened, as we know history. And Augustus becomes emperor. After World War II, a number of people around the world who had experienced that greatest and most horrible of human struggles so far wondered why it had happened, how such a thing could have happened. And one of the answers is that one of the most civilized countries in the world, the Weimar Republic of Germany, was taken over by the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Not by a revolution, not by violence, but by legal processes. The German people permitted Adolf Hitler to become their chancellor. They had several opportunities to vote whether he should continue as chancellor, and in increasing numbers they voted yeah rather than nein, yes rather than no. The only times that significant numbers of Germans actually pushed back against Hitler was when he sterilized or tried to sterilize all of the people with mental illness and mental retardation in Germany. Because if you have families and you know people, you know that that's not that uncommon. Imagine if it was your brother or sister and suddenly you found out that their tubes had been tied or that they had been castrated because the government decided they shouldn't have children. You, as the family, weren't consulted. The German people didn't like that, and they pushed back. Hitler backed off. The other time was after the riot, the Pogrom of Kristallnacht, in November of 1938, when every village, neighborhood, village and city neighborhood and country town had piles of Jewish property burned, had piles of bricks thrown through every pane of glass in every Jewish business, home, and synagogue. The synagogues and temples themselves were set on fire, and Jews were beaten to death, sometimes in the streets, in front of children, in front of Germans. Some of the people doing the beating were the very neighbors of the Jews. That's its own horror show. On that occasion also, it was the women of Germany that let it be known through the network of women talking to the wives of the Nazis and their leadership, this was too far. This was not in ordinum. This was not acceptable. This was not allowable because this traumatized my kids. And Hitler never did that again. Everything he did after Kristallnacht was done discreetly so that the Germans didn't have to look closely at it, so that the Germans could ignore it and deny it and say after the war, we didn't know. We didn't know. We didn't put the pieces together. Yeah, thousands of Jews were going down that one-way rail line that had a dead end at some kind of factory processing facility. Yeah, the trains kept coming back empty. We thought that they were just endless numbers of slaves or Jews needed to work that factory. Or maybe there was a railhead on the other side of the hill that we didn't know about. We just never put two and two together. One-way railroad, huge numbers of Jews going in, empty trains coming out day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. It never occurred to us that that was a place where Jews were being killed. So after the war, a lot of people blamed the German people for allowing it, for permitting it. Historians can be obnoxious. They can sit back, safe in their armchairs or at their desks, and write how everyone in the past made stupid mistakes, preventable errors, obvious foolishness. But it's not so easy to say that when you're in a crowd full of people that are chanting a slogan. And it's not so easy to say that when there's a secret police watching everything you do, ready to pounce on you and hurt you if you even don't cheer loudly enough, let alone criticize. It's easy for a guy named Daniel Goldhagen. I think it was in the 1990s. He wrote a book, Hitler's Willing Executioners, about how the German people are guilty of Nazi war crimes because the German people permitted it. And the thing is, while it's obnoxious and it's self-serving and it's easy, the Goldhagen thesis is not wrong. The German people had been free. They allowed their freedom to be taken by Hitler and the National Socialists. We as Americans don't all agree. Some of us think that there's systemic racism and unfairness in the country that needs to be stopped. Some of us think that the Constitution is at risk. And there are hundreds of other things we argue about. So long as we're allowed to continue arguing, I suspect freedom will be okay. But when people are shut down, I'm not so sure. that that's a good thing. I guess that's it. Unless you have any questions, comments, or thoughts. To me, the scariest thing about the fall of the Republic is that the people let it happen. And it's a hint at other times, like Germany, where the people let it happen. And the great fear that I have, aside from global thermonuclear war, is that we, the American people, will sit passively by while our Constitution is replaced by something else, which in effect will be dictatorship. I don't want that. I don't want it from the right or from the left.
I did kind of to bring it up on like people allowing their freedom to be taken away. I did watch a documentary, so I don't know too much about it, but I know a little bit.
Yep.
Nazi Germany especially had a lot of propaganda, so people thought that they had their freedoms, that what was happening was right, and so because of carefully placed propaganda and carefully woven lies, Hitler was able to keep them in the dark. So it's not entirely their fault because they didn't really have the opportunity to open.
I get your point that propaganda certainly warped things. In fact, Hitler's propaganda minister, that poisonous dwarf Joseph Goebbels, once said that the bigger the lie, the more effective it will be. Because people assume nobody's going to be so blatant as to shout a bald-faced lie. They'll think they're going to try to keep the lie somewhere near the truth. No. So big lies that are completely baseless, actually are more easy to believe if they're sold properly. Yeah, you're right. Propaganda is a problem, which is why people in America today are concerned about things like critical race theory in schools. Children, the younger they are uncritical. Sponges, they will absorb information. And if you teach them from a young age that the only thing that matters is the color of your skin, which is the heart of critical race theory, and the corollary, white people bad, dark people good, they'll believe it. Even when they develop critical faculties and think about judgment, they'll still, at a gut level, believe what they were taught when they were impressionable. That's a form of propaganda that's concerning. But let's assume that you're a normal person, that were raised in a republic that has some degree of judgment. I think that most people know when they're being BS'd. I think most people know when they're being lied to. And I think there comes a point where you make a decision. Do I fight it or do I go along with it? It's so exhausting to fight it. I know. It's exhausting to every day have to deal with the same torrent of lies and to try to, even in the privacy of my own mind, say, not true, not true, not true, not true, and then to speak out about it. It's exhausting. It's depressing. It's like that poem by William Butler Yeats, The Second Coming, which talks about the rise of Antichrist. And in this poem, which is inspired by World War I, Yeats says that it seems like people of conviction have lost all conviction. I should probably look up the poem because it applies. I guess my point is, okay, people were lied to. That doesn't mean that they're guilt-free. Because on some level they chose to accept it. I don't believe that people are passive. I don't believe that people need to be just receptacles to whatever propaganda comes their way. I believe that people can choose to be critical. Not cynics, but skeptics. And if you decide not to do that, you're selling yourself out. And I think that the Germans did that. And I think a lot of people today do that. There's a comedian, Whoopi Goldberg. She's been around for decades. And she stupidly said that the Holocaust wasn't about race. And you don't go for deep thought to Whoopi frickin' Goldberg on The View. But people got up in arms, and she tried apologizing for it on one of the late night shows, and she made it worse. Because it's clear that the only racial divide she sees is black and white. That's critical race theory right there. But it isn't the only racial divides. The Jews are not just a religion, they are a race. Hitler thought of them as a race. If you had a Jewish grandparent, you were considered to be Jewish to some extent. It's a race. Hitler saw it that way. But what Whoopi Goldberg saw was two groups of white people. Who cares? Was that wise and decent history? No. But was it an honest mistake? Yes. Now, she, personally, and that show, The View, have been behind a lot of the campaigns to cancel anyone who varies from their orthodoxy. They've recently been trying to get a guy named Joe Rogan canceled because he questions the narrative of the science on COVID. He asks questions, so he's got to be canceled. I don't believe that. I don't think that Goldberg should be fired. I think that she should stop trying to get other people fired for saying the wrong thing or for thinking or believing the wrong thing. I don't like her. I don't agree with her. But it's a free country. And everyone has a right to be wrong. I really believe that so long as everyone's able to speak their mind, freedom's probably not in too much danger. But when we get to a point where we can't tolerate other points of view because there's no room for hate here, it's so easy to just say that somebody who disagrees with you is hateful. Yeah.
Me and my mom were actually talking about that, and my dad. I told my mom that Whoopi Goldberg said it's not about race, and she immediately agreed with that opinion because she likes Whoopi Goldberg. And then she said, I asked why, and she said, it didn't even make sense. She said Hitler believed he was the better race, but that doesn't make it about race. And I didn't understand that at all.
God bless her. I don't know her. I wish her the best. And I think what she meant was you don't let evil people define reality. Maybe that's it. But I have talked to people who said, at Fort Hood, our biggest Army barracks in Texas, Major Nidal Hassan, an Army psychologist and a Muslim chaplain, went into public areas with his sidearm and started shooting people, shouting, Allahu Akbar, which is Arabic for God is great. And he made clear he was acting for the jihad in sympathy with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and all that stuff. And the Obama administration at first tried to sell the idea that it was simply a case of workplace violence. They denied that Hassan shouting Allahu Akbar as he murdered his fellow American soldiers was a religious motive. I don't get that either. I think good for her. Quickly.
The point that she argued was that Hitler made the people think it was about race, but he just wanted to be evil.
Hitler saw Germans as a different race from French, as a different race from Italians, as a different race from Jews and Gypsies and Black and Slavs, all that stuff. So for him, he had an entire racial system. If you take my class next year, you're going to learn about it. For Hitler, everything was about race, pretty much.
That's kind of the point that I argued back, but she didn't talk to me for the rest of the day.
People have deep feelings. Again, respect your mom because she produced you. And as weird as you are, you're not that bad. I mean that well. Okay, this is Yeats' Second Coming, and then we'll move on. Once you're done with that, just put it in the shelf and head back to your seat. The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconeer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming! Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert a shape, with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again. But now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. And again, what that is about is Antichrist. But the line, the best lack all convictions while the worst are filled with the passionate intensity, that's what it feels like sometimes. To be the lone voice, or to feel like you're the only voice of reason in a crazy world. The Roman people gave up on freedom. The German people gave up on freedom. God forbid, hopefully we won't. You can see how it can happen. You can have sympathy for the people who are being propagandized or being terrorized or being victimized, but they still gave up on it. Freedom sometimes needs to be fought for. And yeah, in any case, that's where we are. Any last thoughts before we move into the story of Christianity? Okay. I'm going to start this. Actually, in your notes, just above, flick a little head, and you'll see the page that has the Nicene Creed on it. The Nicene Creed is a prayer, which is supposed to be basic Christian. And I'll tell you about that. It's one... Where did I put it? Do you find it?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, it's after the Bible quotes. Okay. So you go after the Bible quotes, and it's a page that looks like this. Further in. Got a bunch of diagonally formatted lines. There you go. Diagonally. I think that's a word. A little farther. There you go. Okay. Looks like it's
That's probably because it has.
You may want to restaple that.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the disclaimer, which is why I'm having you look ahead. This handout describes a widely set of clear beliefs shared by most Christians for over 1,600 years, because the Nicene Creed was done in the early 300s. Remember, this lesson is about learning what historical cultures believed. It is not what about you or I might believe or not believe. Now you can go back to where we were. We are studying Christianity not because I'm a lousy Christian. I am. We are studying Christianity because it is important. Because the Christian faith became the core idea of Western civilization and has remained the core idea of Western civilization from at least the 300s AD when the Romans legalized it to at least the 1970s when the Western world decided, ooh, let's experiment with secularism. But still, even now, when you listen to left-wingers and communists and progressives and other people who want to talk about how unjust we are, they use Christian assumptions that everyone has value. They use Christian assumptions that everyone should be treated nicely or decently. These are Christian assumptions. They do not come from other sources in Western civilization. So whether Jesus is in fact the only begotten Son of God, our Savior, or whether Jesus was a deluded carpenter's son who went mad with his own importance, or somewhere else, doesn't matter. You and or your family may be deeply Christian. You may be Roman Catholic or Lutheran or Presbyterian, Wesleyan or Methodist, Baptist, Anabaptist, Quaker, Shaker, Seventh-day Adventist, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You might be a Jehovah's Witness, or you might be Jewish, or you might, yeah, that includes the Hasidim, the Orthodox Jews, the secular Jews. You could be a Muslim. You could be an atheist. You could be a pagan. Oh, yeah, let's bring back the Great Oak. You could be an atheist, a Buddhist. I did. Well, I said it twice because atheism is a religion and people. You could be a communist. It doesn't matter what you are. You could love Christians or hate them. You could be a Christian or want nothing to do with them. This is not about your belief. It's about their belief, the belief of our ancestors, and how that belief shapes the world. I'm going to do my best to teach basic, mainstream Catholic and Protestant notions of Christianity. No doubt, somewhere along the line, I'm going to cheese people off because devout Christians who are members of a denomination will have problems with some of the things I say because they don't match their particular assumptions about things. Or I might say things that irritate you because you don't like Christians or Christianity and you think it's a giant canard, which is a giant con game, a giant lie. I am also not a fundamentalist. Some people are. There are fundamentalists of all religions. Fundamentalists believe that you can reduce a great religion to a set of rules, and that you can tell who's saved and damned by how they behave in front of you. If they behave according to the rules, they're saved. If they violate your set of rules that you think God put in place, they're damned. That's fundamentalism. There are fundamentalist Jews, Christians, and Muslims. There are fundamentalist Hindus and Buddhists, for that matter, and communists. No, I'm not one of them. I don't pretend to know God's will beyond a very certain point. I certainly don't pretend to know who's saved and who's damned. I'm also not a liberation theologian. If you want to think of fundamentalism as one extreme on the religious spectrum, liberation theology and social justice theology is on the other. Liberation theology and social justice theology is a mixture of Marxist ideas and Christian ideas. There are variants of this in Judaism. I don't know if the Muslims have that yet, but at some point they might. What liberation theology is, what social justice theology is the belief that the kind of oppression communism supposedly fights is an oppression that comes from religious errors. That Jesus didn't come to save souls. Jesus came to change the world and to make the world socially just. And therefore, that the church and Christian believers should all be behind every social justice cause that exists. I'm not that either. I'm not a fundamentalist. I'm not a social justice or liberation theologian. I think that both of them are political, and both of them are extremes where people try to play God. Social justice warriors damn anyone who the communists would damn. Fundamentalists damn anyone that doesn't follow their particular set of rules. I try not to damn anyone, because I am so ripe for damnation myself. I don't want to cast stones. I live in a very glass house as regards things like this. So I am not trying to tell you the one true faith, because I don't know the one true faith. I am speaking as a historian. I am speaking as somebody who's tried to educate himself about Christianity. I am speaking as a Christian believer, but I am trying not to proselytize my beliefs. I am trying to show you what I understand about historical Christianity so that you can take it into account in terms of the history and in terms of the world around you, because it's still one of the most important things in shaping global culture. The Christian faith is still the fastest growing religion on the planet. Believe it or not. So, if I say something that disagrees with your personal belief system or your family's belief system, you can feel free to argue a different point of view in class, and I'll give you time, reasonable amount of time to do that. And I will not try to persuade you otherwise. I might say why I don't necessarily teach that, but I'm not going to try to prove you wrong. That's not my intention. If you want to tell me later, that's fine. If you want your folks to contact me, that's fine. It's all been done. One of the greatest arguments I had with a true believing family, and they're wonderful people, kids and the parents, but they didn't like the fact that I was teaching that Mary may have had sex with Joseph after Jesus was born, and that Jesus might have had brothers, which some Christians believe, but some Christians believe that Mary was ever immaculate, never had sex, and that therefore the only child she had was Jesus. And when they talk about James, the brother of Christ, they mean brother in spirit, they mean cousin or something like that. That's not my particular approach. I respect the belief in the ever immaculate conception. It's not the way I approach things. I recognize it. I say this is what some people believe, but I'm not going to teach theology. I'm not going to teach dogma. I'm not going to teach that Mary was never touched by man. I'm not. I'm going to mention it as what some people believe. I'm going to also mention the alternative possibility, and then we'll move on. So, these ground rules are important because, again, some people could care less, but some people are deeply interested in how Christianity is dealt with. Are there any questions, comments, or thoughts before we begin?
Some people interpret like Mary being like pure and a virgin as like pure of spirit as opposed to physically, because not everyone's pure physically, and so if she's pure in spirit and not a sinner, then that would mean she's like, yeah.
Absolutely. I tend to fall in that category actually, but it does not matter to me. It's important that people understand that there are believers that Mary never knew Joseph before Jesus was born. That's what a lot of people believe. It doesn't necessarily mean that Mary never then knew Joseph afterwards. She was only 14 or 15 when she had Jesus. So there was a long life. She at least lived until Jesus was taken down from the cross because she was there to hold the body. So that's a long time, even if Joseph died fairly young. So do you believe? It's a question of faith. And that's where I'll leave it. Yes, you're right. People do believe. Okay. So, Christianity. The historical Jesus in the Jewish tradition. Now, we did a little bit of this at the beginning of the year, but I'm going to just go back. Monotheists, starting with Jews, because they're the oldest of monotheistic faiths, believe that the universe is created by God, and that human beings, being part of the universe, are created by God. That the first man was Adam, the first woman was Eve, and Adam and Eve, after living for a while in the Garden of Eden, sinned. God had a rule, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The story goes that Eve was tempted by the serpent. Whether the serpent was a physical creature whispering at her, or whether it was her own set of temptation, whatever. Or just tear it open and have done with it. I don't care. I'm not trying to make a big deal of it. It's just driving me nuts. So, because I'm easily irritated, apparently. Sorry. So, for whatever reason, Eve is motivated to go, oh, this is the forbidden fruit. Wow, it's forbidden. Hey, Anna, try it. Okay, honey. So, there's that. And because of this sin, Adam and Eve and humanity are cast out of paradise and thrown into a very hard world where you've got to work, earn your food by the sweat of your brow, and everything hurts, and childbirth is agonizing, and it's just, life on this world is not a Garden of Eden. Our living standard in the United States, for the most part, is really, really cushy. And I like it that way, okay? I've gotten used to that, I've got to admit. But it's not normal. What's normal is you do physical work for 12 hours or so a day, maybe more, maybe less. And then you eat a frugal set of meals, and then you sleep. And every so often you pray. That's what's normal. What we have, which is just almost endless free time, and work and education, and warm houses in winter and cool houses in summer, and nice clean clothing and showers. That's really the exception. So humanity is thrown into a tough world, and there are the stories of the Moses and the people at the beginning of the world, and they were faithless, and Moses was faithful, and God told him build an ark, and Moses built an ark and filled it with animals, and the faithless Noah. Ah!
You're wrong.
Noah. It happens. Yeah, cancel me, fire me. Believe me, that's been tried too. More than once. You let someone like that teach your children. They're children. Anyway, the Noah. I get madder. It kind of does. Noah builds the ark, and the unvirtuous people are all flooded out, and Noah is the founder of a new humanity. And there's the Tower of Babel story. They build a tower as tall enough to look God in the eye, and God says, "Really? Beep." And suddenly, people can't understand one another, and the tower is lost. There's all that. There's also the story of Abraham in one of the world's first civilizations near Ur. And Abraham hears God and leads his people out into the desert on a wandering because God told him to, and brings the people ultimately to live as refugees on the outskirts of the land of Canaan. These are the Hebrews. Abraham is the father of a great race, the Jewish race, the Hebrew race, and in case you're wondering, Jewish ancestry is passed matrilineally. Matrilineally is not through the father's line, but through the mother's line. If you are born of a Jewish woman, you are Jewish, according to the Jews. If you are born of a Gentile woman, you may become Jewish, but it's not a given. So, by the time of Moses, the Jews are in Egypt as slaves. Again, I'm going quickly because we covered this at the beginning of the year. Moses believes, like Abraham, that God speaks to him, and Moses, who has Egyptian training, leads the Jews in the great Exodus out of Egypt. And Moses is the guy who is given credit for writing the first 5 books of the Holy Bible. And Moses is the guy who really formulates a lot of the beliefs. So Moses takes the old traditions of the creation of the world and organizes them. Moses takes 2 or 3 stories about Noah and puts them together. Moses decides, with God's inspiration, what the 10 Commandments are. At least Moses is the vessel through which the 10 Commandments are passed from God to the Hebrews. All of this makes the Jews a people apart. Because of all people on earth, they are the only ones that worship the one true God. Other nations like Babylon or later Rome will be stronger than the Jews. Other nations like the Greeks and the Turks will be wealthier than the Jews and more culturally rich. But the Jews have the one true faith. They are God's chosen people. So, both culturally and ethnically and racially, the Jewish people and their tradition is unique. And you know what the world hates? Individuals. To be an individual is to be indecent, is an old axiom. And you know it. Because if you're sort of eccentric, people aren't going to go, hey, let's be pals. They might go, oh, you're weird. Stay away. You're icky. You got weird cooties. Yeah, I do. They're fun. So, the Jews are different from everyone. And that difference, that stubborn insistence that they have the only God and that all the other gods are demons or are false, really, really, really upsets other people. And so you end up with the Babylonians deciding, after the time of David and Jewish conquest, that the Jews need to be taught a lesson. I'm going to learn you something about yourself, you Jew. So the Babylonians, who obviously speak like Cletus the slack-jawed yokel from Oklahoma, they get put in caves and locked in, and the only food that's let in is pork. And what you gonna do now? You gonna starve? You gonna eat each other? You gonna eat the pork? We'll find out. They enjoyed it. It's not like the Babylonians did what they did to the Jews with reluctance. This is going to hurt me more than it hurt. No, this is going to hurt you a lot more than it hurts me. I'm going to have fun with this because you are such stubborn people. So I'm not blaming the Jews for their persecution. I'm explaining it psychologically. People don't like other people when they're too sure of themselves. People don't like other people when they set themselves apart. People don't like other people when they have a pride about themselves. And the Jews, as a people, being God's chosen people, they have all those qualities, which, by the way, I think are good qualities. What makes people not like them? Envy, shame, whatever darkness lives in their soul. If people paid attention to their own stuff, the world would be a lot nicer, but it would also be very different, because who cares if the Jews exist and they do their thing? Why does it matter to you? Why have so many people throughout history gone out of their way to express their anti-Semitism through violence? Why? Because on some level, it bothers them. Oh, those Jews, they just rubbed me the wrong way. Why? Well, obviously I don't have enough in my life to worry about, so I got to worry about theirs. Anyway, so this unique people, 100 years before Jesus, rises up against the Greek Empire, a successor saint to Alexander the Great, and throws them out. The Maccabees are inspired by God to fight what seems to be an irresistible world empire, and they win. Go figure. Because if God is on our side, who can stand against us? Now, this Maccabean example is going to echo into the time when Jesus was born. Because what people will say is, oh, the Romans are here now. Romans seem like an unbeatable world empire. But so did the Greeks. Yeah, you know what happened to them. So maybe, if we're brave, and if we follow God, maybe we can overthrow the Romans with God's help. Just like we overthrew the Greeks. And this hatred of Rome and this revolutionariness, along with people who wanted to work with Rome, are going to bubble through Jesus' time here on earth. And we'll talk about the details of that starting tomorrow. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Did I see a question, or did I miss one? Is there a question? Isaac, do you have a question? Okay. Then we're set. Do you have an assignment due Monday? No, you don't. Your next chapter survey is in March. So good for you. Now, if I were you, because I'm going to give you a hint, fourth quarter, you're going to have a chapter survey every week. Just like the sophomores. It's called Getting Ready for Sophomore Year. So if I were you, I might actually get ahead and do some of those early. Okay. Thank you. Come again.